More broadly than that, kind of the work we've been doing at OnlyWire for about the last 3 or 4 months to kind of implement a redesign and at the same time move our architecture away from just a PHP-based app that's all rendered from the server to kind of splitting things, integrating more JavaScript, integrating some features that come along with that, and how we kind of, or at least I kind of learned about Vue.js, adopted that incrementally, and now I bother everybody at work about how it's awesome. And hopefully you'll understand some of that and maybe think the same way by the end of this. So I'm not actually going to have slides. This is really just the story of how I found out about this and what I've been doing over the past few months. So I'm really just going to talk about that and kind of show you each step of the process that I went through to learn about the framework, small applications that I built and what that code looked like, and then how they kind of grew. But you'll kind of see that Vue doesn't really change a whole lot as your code grows. The complexity to me doesn't feel like it increases. You kind of learn some core concepts, what a Vue instance looks like, and then you just continue making Vue instances. And to me, the benefit there has been that you get to think a little bit more about the application you want to build versus how to do something in Vue or how the framework, fighting the framework and things like that. You end up just writing JavaScript and thinking, what do I want this application to be like? So I will start with, well, show of hands, how many people are familiar with or have used Vue in the past? Oh, pretty good. How many people are React fans? Probably a lot of those. Angular? 2? Angular 2? Okay. So some of this will be familiar. Whoops, did I break something? Nope. Vue is kind of a newcomer, and the benefit of that is that they've had time to kind of observe what's out there in the world and see what's worked in the ecosystem and what hasn't worked. And so you'll see some familiar concepts like directives in your templating that you see often in React. You'll see similar concepts like component-based architecture that's pretty popular in the React world, and maybe extend that to other languages like Elm. And you'll kind of see how those are sprinkled throughout to provide something that's lightweight, that gets the job done, but then again kind of gets out of your way and gives you the freedom to do what you need to do. So let me just bring up the browser. And I like this little sentence they had on the Vue guide that kind of summed things up. They talk about how, unlike other frameworks, Vue is designed from the ground up to be incrementally adoptable. And that's really what I found. Going back to 4 months ago, we were presented with an entire application redesigned for us in Sketch mockups. All static mockups with a little bit of guidance from Sketch plugins on some CSS guidance. But basically it was all static, and it was our job to build that and make it live. And so we thought we had been wanting to show our platform a little bit more love and kind of decouple things and added more JavaScript. It was pretty much at that point just PHP and jQuery. So we thought we can do better. Why don't we take this opportunity with the redesign to kind of implement a new JavaScript architecture, kind of standardize some things. But we weren't really sure where we wanted to go with that, what tools we wanted to use. I had a little bit of a background with Ember. Other people had used Angular and React, but we didn't really have any definite opinions on like, yes, we definitely have to go with this framework or that framework. At the same time, I had heard a lot about Vue from working with another PHP framework, Laravel, and it's pretty popular in that community. Never really worked with it, but I was curious how Vue fit in with that mix. So basically what I did is I went to Vue.js.org and I took maybe a half day, maybe a day to just read through the documentation and find out what that was all about. And so if you get nothing from this talk, the TLDR is take a couple hours and go to Vue.js.org and read through the documentation. If you're interested in just kind of seeing what another framework is about and seeing maybe some new concepts, just read through the documentation. I think you'll learn things about that you can take back to React, that you can take back to Angular. Maybe if you're interested in building your own framework, some concepts on how to build a framework that's easily adoptable, lightweight, but still pretty powerful as it scales. So let's see here. The last bit of information I'm going to give you here is the Vue instance. And this is kind of the core of everything you do in Vue. And it's really just an object. It's an object that can take some properties. The main one you'll be working with is the data property. Data is, if you've used other frameworks where you have the simple hello world with a template that binds to some variable, data is where you would put that variable or variables. And they are reactive. As that data property changes, those variables change and they get updated in the template. That's a pretty standard concept. It takes some other things like you have some method hooks, which are just functions that are available in that scope. You have some computed properties, which are what they sound like. They are functions that return some data that's based on some other kind of data that gets computed and updated. What's nice about those is that they are cached, and so you get some performance benefits there versus just a normal method or a function, because if the data that computed property relies on changes but the value doesn't change, then it just uses the cache value and you don't take a performance hit there. There is, let me see, they don't actually show it here, but you can build components as well, and interestingly, they look exactly like a normal Vue instance. So there again, you're not really learning anything new there. The only difference is your Vue instance binds to an element, which is pretty common. You do that in React. You pick an element to bind to as your kind of top layer app element. You do the same thing in Vue. Your components don't bind to an element, but they have a template property. And that template can be written as a string. I'll show you once I get to some of my code base that template can also be written as normal HTML. And so there again, you don't need to learn anything new. You just write HTML with a little bit of syntax, curly braces to say where your reactive properties go. And here again, you haven't learned any new concepts. You learn about this Vue instance. It takes an object. That object's got the same properties, whether it's a component or not. And then you can go back to thinking about your app. So that's enough of reading documentation.
I have a question real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Before you change. Could you show them at the bottom on the left in Meta? It's like very close to the bottom. Should be in Meta. There it is, right there. Comparison with other frameworks.
Oh, yeah.
If
So
you go down, it compares it to React. It's kind of cool.
yeah, so this is probably, when I said I spent that day reading, this is probably where you should start if you're used to using another framework, because it really talks about performance comparisons. And even more than that, what I found most interesting was not so much the performance, but just the methodology, the thinking. And they really do a good job of comparing the thinking of React versus the thinking with Vue. There's always ways that we can optimize for performance. Once we get our app built, we can go back and optimize where those bottlenecks are, because they're going to be different for every single app. But really to me, at least, I found it more important to think about the development methodology and the way that I'm going to be building my app throughout the process. And this does a really good job of comparing that to React, comparing some of the choices they made, some things they borrowed from React, some ways areas where they chose to go in different directions. And so, yeah, I'd really encourage you to check out this section too. Just take 30 minutes, kind of browse through it. If it doesn't interest you, then maybe Vue's not for you. If it does, then maybe dig a little more. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I'll go on to show you what we've been building. Ooh, that didn't load right. Okay. So OnlyWire is a social media syndication platform. If you are a social media manager or a business owner, and maybe you're trying to market yourself on social media, or you just have lots of content to post to different networks, we're a platform that enables you to do that. And this redesign task that we had was focused on our web platform specifically. Lots of people use our WordPress plugins and they use our browser plugins to kind of post directly from pages and syndicate content that way. And so our platform can actually run pretty well without people using the web platform. And because of that, it really hadn't been shown a lot of love in a while. So the redesign was focused specifically on the web platform. Let me just log in here really quick. Into kind of a demo account I set up. And then I'll go to our new stuff. Uh-oh. So we've got some responsive issues there, but I think you'll still be able to kind of see what we were trying to accomplish and how we were able to do that with Vue. Before I actually log in, I'll show you the first thing that we actually use Vue for. So this page is, before you even log in, what this is a list of all of our frequently asked questions. This was something that we had before. The redesign kind of cleaned up some styles and things like that. And as I was going through and building out this page, I noticed that the search bar wasn't really living up to its full potential, in my opinion. What you can do is you can search for terms and then they come up. If we don't have any terms like that, we'll tell you we don't have those and we'll just show you everything. And then of course you can clear that out. It's pretty simple. This was actually being handled before by jQuery. And so I'm reading about Vue and I thought, if I really want to try this out, what's the simplest possible thing that I can do? A step up from like a hello world. And I thought this, a search feature isn't super complex. So I thought, well, let me see how Vue can tackle this. And I gave it a shot. So let me show you what this code actually looks like. So a lot of what you're going to see here is a mix of our PHP templating language twig. A lot of the stuff is actually rendered on the server. And so this was a really good test for Vue because at this point I was still suspicious. I didn't really want to try out a new framework. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. So I didn't rewrite the whole page. I rewrote literally just that search feature, just what jQuery was handling, and everything else was rendered from the server. So what you'll see here is this is all twig content here. This is being rendered from the server by PHP. And this verbatim tag, this allows me to tell my backend template, hey, don't worry about any of the stuff in here. Just render it like it is. And so I was able to keep these curly braces so that JavaScript could handle that. And I could use that as my Vue template. So just to kind of quickly go through here, on line 17, This VIF is a view directive similar to what you have in Angular to say, if this variable is truthy, do this stuff. This vcloak says, don't even, this is going to be a part of my template, but don't render it at all until the rest of the page is loaded. And this was really nice to, this is that little search feature where I can clear the search bar out, clear the search term out and kind of reset the whole form. This was really nice to fix little issues where stuff gets rendered into the DOM and it's taking up space, and you really don't want that to take up space because the user's not even supposed to know it's there until it needs to be active. So this was a really nice, handy little a handy little directive to allow me to do that. Similar to Angular, I can bind to a click event. So on the click of that little clear search button, this is going to call a reset method. And then if we go down a little further, here I'm saying if my search is empty, or if I have stuff in my search, then you can render this. Otherwise, cloak it and act like it's not even on the page, because remember, I'm still suspicious here. So what I'm actually doing is this entire list of stuff is rendered from the server. Because that was already happening, I didn't have to do any extra work to do that. So I kept that rendering from the server, and that just gets hidden. And that's similar to what we were doing in jQuery. In terms of performance, I figured I would just try it and see how it went. And if it was like too much data and it was hurting rendering times, I wouldn't bother with it. That ended up not being the case, and the user doesn't even know that there's basically two lists being kind of swapped out and interchanged. And so that's another thing that I kind of learned, not to optimize prematurely. Because Vue is so simple, you can kind of build your apps like you're prototyping them and just kind of get in and try stuff. And so I could get in, I could pull in some JSON, render that list, and then see, okay, one, does that work? And then two, am I killing my performance? Am I going to need to refactor this? If I needed to refactor it, Vue's still pretty simple, so there's not a whole lot to do to refactor things. But I found that I would get in this mode of just kind of trying stuff out, and it gave me the freedom to experiment. And oftentimes, in that experimentation, I would find the right path without really making a whole lot of mistakes, because I could just focus on thinking, okay, what do I want to build here? I want to build a search box that only displays a list of stuff when it's there. Okay, so this is the template. If we go down, this is more PHP stuff. And here we get to that Vue instance. So just like I showed you before in the documentation, we're creating a new view. We're binding to this ID of support page. Here I set up my data. I wanted my search to be empty on page load, obviously. There was no search term, there were no messages, and there were no results. If we go down in the methods, I think I only have two methods in here. I've got a get results, where I go out and I fetch some JSON data that the server is kind of filtering results based on the search term. And this is all pretty standard. I set that search empty is false, set a message that, hey, we're looking up results. And then once we're done, I say search is true. If I didn't find anything, I tell you that. Otherwise, I tell you I'm showing the results. So it's all pretty simple. And then reset is just kind of what you would expect. I reset all the values back to where they were before. So this was, I think this took me maybe a couple hours. I decided to just kind of dig in and try it out.
I see you're using Lodash in there.
Yeah, I was using Lodash because One, because I'm weird and I think functional stuff is cool because I'm on that kick now. Two, because they showed that in some of the examples, and I was still suspicious, still not in the kind of the experimenting mode that I am now, and I was really concerned about performance. That I'm rendering a list of frequently asked questions, and then I'm potentially re-rendering that list from the server, and I didn't know how all that was going to work out, so I kind of wanted that debounce method, and I didn't want to write my own. I figured I'd try theirs first and see how it worked out. So I really just pulled it in just for that, for the debounce method. But yeah, you can see that there's really not a whole lot going on here. I'm initializing the Vue instance. I'm giving it some data. I got my two methods, and my template at the top was just, it's PHP templating in this case, but you could think of that as just HTML. This could be stuck in the bottom of any script tag in any HTML page. And this took me about 2 hours just because I was kind of cautiously going through, kind of trying it out. So I thought, well, okay, that's kind of cool. Didn't take a whole lot of work. And I felt a little bit comfortable with it, but I still wasn't completely sold. Still wasn't really sure how that would scale because that was a pretty simple example. So here you can see we've gotten into the platform. This is maybe a month or two later. I've kind of been working with Vue to build out these. This is a whole Vue app. Basically, every single one of these links are small Vue apps. So I'll kind of contrast where I got from there because I'm starting to get hooked, but I'm still not completely sold on everything. And so I should also kind of talk about some of the design decisions that we made. Obviously, you noticed there was a lot of like mixing templates and things like that. One of our key constraints was that we could not just rebuild the entire application. We couldn't just redo all the architecture and API everything and single page apps. That would have been awesome. That would have been much easier. But we kind of had to stick closely to what we already had and build things incrementally because we had to get buy-in from our supervisors. And obviously, if you tell somebody I'm going to rebuild the entire way your application works, they're a little suspicious of that. So this is another area where I felt that Vue shined in that it was really easy for me to just take these Vue instances, stick them into something that rendered out to HTML, and they just work. And so instead of rebuilding our entire platform as one big single page application, I've got little single page applications within my pages, and this is just HTML. That at the top is just HTML. JavaScript doesn't touch that. It doesn't have to. The applications don't necessarily need to know about each other. They just need to know about the data that they have. And so this is kind of the this is kind of where Vue scales. It'll show you that a little bit. Vue has these concepts of single page components. If you want to do something that's a little bit more ambitious and you kind of want to go with more of a component architecture, Vue has official templates. The one I'm using is a Webpack template that allows me to use what are called single file components. So I can write a .vue file that will have a template wrapped in template tags. It'll have a script that's got my normal Vue instance, just like it would be, just like I had embedded at the bottom. And I can even put my styles down here. I don't have to do that as my styles kind of grow. Sometimes I don't want to, but what's nice is I have the benefit of using, I can use Sass in here. I can scope my styles, so they're just isolated to that component. I've really got a lot of freedom with where I want to go with that. I can still put my styles, they can just be global application styles, and they can load from my index page, and that's fine. But I've got a lot of freedom with how I want to do that. And the framework really doesn't lock me in with those choices. So let's kind of compare that first implementation with what we're doing now. You can see we're still using directives up here at the top. This is one just to show if we're loading or not. If we are, I show a little thing saying, hey, we're still loading the page if our server is running slow. Here we've got our search page like before. This @ symbol is basically a shorthand for that v-on directive. So on click prevent the default because I have something else kind of handling that. I think where I ended up with this was the design called for a button, and I realized we really don't need a button with kind of the smoothness of the interface now. So I think I left that to just prevent the default, and I was going to discuss that with the designer, see if we take it out, do something else with it, or if we need it. Here again, we have our reset search, and that's pretty similar to what we were doing before. And I'm still just writing HTML. It's just that I have everything isolated to this component. And this is an entire page component, but I can, just like in React, I can nest components and components just like you would expect to be able to do. And still, they're just Vue instances that have some kind of template, and maybe they have styles, maybe they don't. Maybe they have some of those methods like your data, your computed. Maybe they don't. Vue leaves that up to you. All you need is a Vue instance object. So let's look at that object. So here we can kind of see the difference. When you're using the single page templates, you get to write your objects as kind of the module syntax that we're used to. Because Webpack can compile all this and use a Vue loader, and it knows how to handle all this. So a component takes a name. It takes properties that you can pass into it, obviously, like you would expect. You have to explicitly define those properties. And but once you define them, they work just like data. You can expect to have them there, and they work just like something in your data object. Inside a component, data needs to be a function, and that function returns the object that you would use in a normal Vue instance. Other than that, it's exactly the same. I can call a created hook to say, hey, when this component gets created, do something specific. I have watchers that are similar to computer properties, except that they listen for a change on another property, and they allow you to write some logic based on that change. And you'll get in, I'm not passing any properties in here, but you'll get what the old value was, what the new value is, and you can handle that how you want. The difference between watchers and computed is that they don't cache at all. So you kind of have to weigh the benefits and the drawbacks of that.
Are you watching the router? The Vue router on there?
Yeah, I actually am on this. I didn't want to mention that I was using that yet, but yeah, I'm watching the route. Actually, I'm realizing I need to take this code out. I think this may be a commit that's a little bit old. We haven't pushed the newest stuff yet. I was watching the router because I was loading data for each one of those subpages on every single route. Because again, Vue allows you to get in this mode where you can start developing like you were prototyping. So how I would usually start each one of these little apps was use just Vue. There's another package called Vuex. You can think of it as like Redux for state management. I would usually opt not to use that. I would usually opt not to use the router and just see what I can do with just Vue and push that to its edge and then go back and add in the stuff because it's so simple, it's easy to do that. So originally I did not use the router and I would just load stuff on every link change, and then I realized there was some state that I needed in more than one component, and usually that's a sign to me that I should probably bring in Vuex for state management because things are getting a little bit complex. And when I have two components that clearly need the same piece of state, and that would make my life easier.
I have something to say to that. So I've actually run into that issue, and I don't know if you've used Vuex, but I tried to use Vuex, and it seems like it's more work than necessary. So what I ended up doing is every component has access to this $root. So if you keep all of your data on the main Vue instance, then you can actually reference that data from any component throughout your whole application.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting approach. I guess that's what I like about Vue is that coming from Ember, the benefit is that every Ember app looks like an Ember app. They all look the same. You know what you're going to expect. Vue is far less sparse, but you get the freedom to kind of do what you want, and you need to be responsible with that freedom. But you can kind of choose the path you want to go down. I chose Vuex for most of those occasions because I wanted to explicitly have one single source of truth for everything. And I also was concerned about if we get other developers on the team that don't know Vue, maybe we get jingers in that we need to train on the system, they can go to the Vuex documentation and say, okay, this is what a store looks like. These are the properties. This is how I set one up. Okay, this is what that map state stuff is. They can kind of quickly understand that because all the documentation I've come across has been pretty good. But that's an interesting point, and I think that's kind of one of the things that I learned, that there are a few different ways to solve problems in Vue. And there's not necessarily a good or bad way that I found. It's just kind of how you want to frame the problem in your head and kind of what makes sense for your application's domain, that type of thing. But yeah, that's an interesting point. And I don't even know that I came across that in the documentation, so I may take a look at it.
I actually got that. Oh, sorry.
If you did it that way, would you be putting into jeopardy? I assume Vuex allows you to do like time travel debugging.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could be putting that into jeopardy if you were to put your state in the root.
That's what I'm thinking, because once you include Vuex, you do get the time traveling debugging. You get you can actually export your state at a particular time in that cycle. You can export that, and maybe you've got QA people, maybe you've got other developers that maybe one of you sees a bug and nobody else can kind of reproduce that bug. If you can reproduce the bug, you export the state, and you can send that to somebody and say, hey, import this. When the state is in this condition, it's got the bug, and then you can kind of troubleshoot from there. So that's a
Pretty cool.
yeah.
That's like my favorite part of bringing in Redux and a redesign.
Yeah. Yeah. See, there's always two sides to the coin, and maybe this leads to more debates, but I think it kind of gives us a freedom that we don't often see when using frameworks as they kind of get stable. I kind of feel that I get in this pattern of learning Hello World examples, really kind of diving in and trying to learn the framework and banging my head up against a brick wall a few times. And then I get the framework because I bought into the doctrine and I know how to use the framework. But in between then, I'm not necessarily productive. And I'm not necessarily thinking about how to build my app. I'm thinking about how to use the framework and what can the framework do. Vue, I've kind of run into very few circumstances where I couldn't just really think about the problem and think about how JavaScript would do that, and then Vue would help me do it faster. So I kind of like to think of it as the way we've been using jQuery for a few years, to just kind of quickly get stuff going. If we need simple things, it's good for that. jQuery tends to, in my opinion at least, it has trouble scaling, and it kind of, things can get a little bit complex. It doesn't necessarily encourage code that's easy to reason about and easy to refactor, and you don't necessarily want to go back on something you wrote in jQuery a month from now and refactor that. Vue is simple enough, but just enough structure that I've gone back 2 weeks, a month now, and refactored stuff. This piece of code, I think I refactored this a week ago. And I had to think about what changes I wanted to make and why I wanted to make those changes and what the trade-offs were. But then I wrote the code and it was done. And really the hardest part was thinking, somewhere in here I made a wrong turn in application design, and I had to think through that. And once I figured that out, I just wrote the code because it's mostly just JavaScript. And that's kind of nice. So I know I've been rambling for quite a while. That was most of what I wanted to show you. And like I would say, or like I said earlier, just go and peek through the documentation. Take 30 minutes and kind of read through the documentation. If you get the kind of the simple examples, just really read through that guide and kind of peek at all the examples. If you get those, try it out on a tiny little project like I did earlier. That was a script tag and maybe 50 lines of JavaScript and some HTML that I would have written anyway. I just kind of changed the way I wrote the template. Try it out. You might be surprised. Maybe you'll go back to React, but you'll think about maybe how you can simplify your React applications a little bit more. Maybe you'll think about how you can simplify your Angular applications a little bit more. If you are writing a framework or ever interested in doing that, I would highly encourage you to take a look at some of their design decisions, because I think we honestly could use more frameworks that are simple. You can kind of get up and running really quick, but as the applications scale, you have just enough freedom that you don't completely like go off the rails and just write the worst piece of code ever and never want to go back to that. I've been using this for, I guess, probably 4 months now, and I have yet to go back to something where I'm just like, oh, this is awful. I'm just going to throw it away completely and start over. I've had things where I've learned, okay, there was a better way to do that. And we all have that. That's just part of learning and the job. We all write code that we want to improve when we go back to that. But I have yet to find something that I'm just like, that was terrible. Why did Vue even allow me to do that? I'm done with this. So yeah, I think that's everything I have to say about it. I'm hooked now, but I'm also not so dogmatic that this is the only thing that I'm ever going to use. I think what I've learned now is that I need to be open-minded, look at things, kind of see how they start from that Hello World example to what a full-fledged Vue.js or React or Angular application looks like out in the wild, and kind of make a decision between there based on what I want out of my application. Thank you again for allowing me to share my thoughts, and enjoy the pizza and beer.
Does anyone have any easy softball questions for Dalton? I don't want to like dive deep into like debates.
Is this like the next big thing? Are we all going to be using this in a year?
No, I don't think so. Vue's been out for probably a couple years. This is version 2. I think it seemed like right around the time Angular 2 came out, I started hearing about Vue 2, and I kind of gave it a second look. I don't think it's React or Angular killer or anything like that. I think they're purposely kind of building slow to make good choices, and I think they would rather have a small, lightweight framework that loads really quickly and kind of gets out of your way, versus like the thing that does everything and is the coolest thing ever. But you gotta learn Vue, and you have to learn the Vue way. You can use Redux in Vue. You can You don't have to use ViewRouter. You don't have to use Vuex. In the documentation, they encourage Page.js, or they show you in like 20 lines of code how to write your own router if you just need something super simple. So they're really just like build cool apps and write JavaScript and then go have a beer.
Nice. Sounds good. Is there a they? For a while, wasn't it just like one guy who was kind of doing everything?
Yeah.
See, that's my concern with, like, I love Elm, but it just doesn't seem like one guy can keep up with React Rita, like that whole ecosystem. But
Well, it's actually a lot of people, and a lot of people are expanding it. Like they have Vue material now,
he just has to approve or something.
and then also they're coming out with Vue Native, Vue Native also, which is they're doing a lot of stuff with Vue.
It seems kind of more similar to like the Python community, where you do have your BDFL, but he's fine with people like contributing and providing that guidance, and even understanding from the conversations I've observed with him having with other people online, understanding that other people know more than him. He just kind of has the general direction, and he's kind of there to guide things in the right way. But I haven't seen anything where he's like, no, it's not getting in my framework. It's just kind of more like the entire community seems open to kind of helping out and being productive. And it seems like everybody just enjoys being productive, and they kind of do what they can to encourage more of that.
Any other questions? One in the back.
So good presentation, man. Thanks. I'm not an expert, which is why I'm here. But I was wondering, are there any limitations that you felt like you found, or any tripping points? And if not, if you can't speak to that. I mean, was there, in exploring it, did you feel like there were certain things that this would be better used for?
Yeah. So in terms of limitations, it is a smaller community. It's not like Elm where you have to write all your own stuff. Like he said, there are material packages and there's routing and they have a whole list of community provided stuff on that documentation site, Vue.js.org. If you look under the link for Vue Awesome, there's like a whole GitHub repo of stuff that people have contributed in the community. But to me, I kind of feel like I've been writing JavaScript off and on for a few years. And so I was comfortable with getting in that mode of just kind of diving in and prototyping and refining as I go along. I guess I would be concerned that somebody that's really new to JavaScript probably wouldn't be that comfortable with that. And they would probably be missing information. Because if you say, just build your instance and give it an object, they may not understand kind of everything that's involved in that and where they need to be careful and where they need to make good decisions. So that's, I guess, something to watch out for if you're a little bit newer. Kind of understand JavaScript best practices and let those kind of guide you. If you see code examples using the framework, understand why they made those choices in their examples, and then I think you'll be okay. What was the second part? Sorry.
Did you think that there were some like applications or uses that it was best suited for?
Oh yeah, so like I mentioned, it seems to be pretty popular in the PHP community. I've seen a few people working with Rails that use it. My guess is that it's really flexible, and that flexibility comes in really handy when you have something like PHP, where the language kind of has its own templating language, or you have Rails, where ERB is pretty good. Your templating is already pretty good, but you have some stuff that JavaScript is just best for, but you don't need JavaScript for everything. It's really good to just like build a small Vue app and just stick it into the middle of the rest of your app, and they can be fine as long as you can give it JSON or find some other way to get that data to JavaScript. They're fine, and it worked really well for that. And like I showed, it could just be a small search bar that renders a list of stuff. It could be an entire page with routing and links, but that's a subsection of your entire app. But I feel like it works best in those situations, because I think our best tool for that up to now has been jQuery, And like I said, jQuery has issues with scaling and kind of refining. And I feel like Vue did a lot better with that.
Awesome. Thank you.